Hey, welcome! This is actually a kind of fake book review, but a real book review. This is a lesson from Miss Poole, that's me, and I am modeling how to do a quick little book review for my students who chose that as an option for their novel study in ELA class. So here we go. Introduce yourself as a reader. So this is how I would do that, okay? Hey, I'm Sarah. I really like reading escapist lit with found family, basically any kind. That's kind of what I enjoy the most. I do read nonfiction. I try and read one nonfiction for every 5 kind of like escapist stuff, but sometimes you just gotta escape into a good book, and that's the kind of books that I like to read. So then you have to explain why you picked the book or the story that you are reviewing. So about a year ago, I was struggling with insomnia, and my therapist said to me, well, what did you do before falling asleep when you were a kid? You didn't have problems sleeping when you were a kid. And I said, well, I used to read before bed. And I was one of those kids in the 80s that, had their flashlight under the covers probably because we didn't have cell phones. So I picked up and bought a bunch of books that I had previously read. And that is why I chose this book. Okay, so the book I'm reviewing today is the complete volume of the first ElfQuest comic book graphic novel series. It was written in the 70s. I read it in the 90s as a young teen, and maybe too young, but it's by Wendy and Richard Pinney. Initially, it was all published under his name, but then they changed it. And they were an independent comic that got picked up by DC. So all of it is black and white. And then in the reissues that I read in the 90s, they were all color, but those are all special editions now, and they'd probably be worth a lot of money if I'd kept them in any kind of shape. So now you say what you loved or what you loathed, and you make it as specific as possible. So you want to go in, you want to be prepped with this one. You want to have quotes, or you want to really specifically talk about a character or a situation, because you want to give people kind of like a glimpse. And this is where you can do something like read out loud from the book, or in this case, actually shows things from the book. So try and say things that you loved and loathed. Maybe you really only loathed it, in which case, go on. Maybe you really only loved it, in which case, go on, but that's what you're doing now. What I loved about the book as a kid is that it was very much a soap opera. So the book is taking place in a world in which elves are kind of the aliens that came there, and the elves that we first meet in the first books are the elves that are paired up with wolves. And I really loved the whole world building of the whole series. I enjoyed that a lot, and I still enjoy it as an adult. I was actually surprised at how much I actually really liked it, because sometimes when you read things as an adult, you're like, oh no, this is awful, but actually quite enjoyed that. I specifically remembered the art. These elves were kind of like short elves. They were barbarian kind of elves, right? And they meet these other people called the Sun Folk. And so these guys have escaped from their woodland home, and they are bonded with their wolves. So they're part of kind of like hunting, and that's their whole thing. And then they meet these guys in the desert, and they have to kind of meld their cultures, right? And the Sun people are there, and they are very much kind of like very civilized. Okay, so like I kind of loved that, but it's also kind of what I loathe as an adult. So as an adult, I can see that an awful lot of the stuff going on here could be seen as appropriative, especially with the Sun Folk. It's very much like they sort of took they kind of combined sort of ideas about Arabic culture with oddly ideas of sort of the Navajo and they did all kinds of stuff there. So that I don't love. And the other thing I don't love is how binary it all is, but I mean, it was written in the 70s. But what I do really enjoy, is that it's very much, given that it was written in the 70s, it's pretty free and easy about sexual mores. I will say, I think it was inappropriate that I was reading this in grade 7. I think my parents didn't really believe in kind of like editing what their kids read. And yeah, I read a lot of things that maybe were a little bit much for me when I was 12. But yeah, still an enjoyable story. Still a big love story. Lots of action. And the art by Wendy Pinney is kind of gorgeous. Like, there's a lot of it. So even though it's kind of like, very cartoony and stuff, here we are. There's all this conflict going on. Even though there's love triangles, I still really enjoyed it. Now, it's good to warn your audience about things, and I kind of already did that automatically there. So tropes and triggers, that's when you let them know what tropes are going to be in there, because some people just don't like to read things with, say, a love triangle in them. And trigger warnings, because sometimes there are things in there that might cause people, they wouldn't want to read that book if they knew it was there. You don't want a spoiler, but you kind of got to err on the side of caution there. So that's how you do this. So in terms of tropes, we have a lot of sort of barbarian tropes meets civilization meets, the humans in here are the bad guys because they're kind of like the barbarians. There's a lot of that kind of stuff in there. So that might annoy people. And it's very binary. Like, the love stories are pretty binary, and I wouldn't say that young kids, despite this being a comic, I wouldn't say that young kids, this is not a comic for young kids. This was written for adults, and it's definitely, it's there. But it is a good yarn, and there's a ton of them, and it's basically like kind of a cool, magical soap opera, and it definitely was worth buying for me. This part, you say what you wish the authors would have done. I wish, but I mean, it was written, 50 years ago. I wish the authors would have more openly shown queer relationships in it, because they just hint at it. And I actually didn't pick up on those hints when I was reading it when I was a kid. It's only as an adult that I read it. But for the time, they were being very, very liberal. And I do wish that there had been, I wish that I was able to get the color version, because that would have been really nice. That's what I really wish. I recommend this for anybody who likes kind of a love story fantasy. I think if you're a fan of kind of like, if you're a fan of sort of like, fated love, meant to be, my soulmate, that kind of thing, there's that. If you like a lot of kind of like world building and different variations on like how elves work or high fantasy, I think you would really, really enjoy this. It's definitely not for anybody under 14. And if you are 14, you should check with your parents first, I think, just because of some of the themes. So then you just give your overall star rating, whatever that is for you. So for me, I would rate this 4.5 stars. 4.5 stars. I know I would rate it 4.5 stars because I went back and I bought all the other volumes. So then you just do a quick recap where you say, okay, this was Sarah Poole. I was reviewing ElfQuest Volume 1 by Wendy and Richard Pinney for my ELA class. And that's it. That's how you do it.